Welcome to Corralling the Chaos podcast, where we talk publicly about the things you're worried about privately. My name is Angela Leah, and I'm your host. This is the event industry podcast for companies and crew, where we're going to go deep and nothing is off limits. Welcome back to Corralling the Chaos, where today we are going to talk about settling when it comes to your technology tools and why our industry can just no longer afford to do that. And we recently did a survey where we got an overwhelming amount of responses, and we learned some really interesting things that we wanted to report on and dive into today. And to help me do that, I've asked industry veteran and LASSO founder Clay Sifford to join us. Clay has been in the event industry for over 20 years, initially as the founder of a mid-sized production company. So he has firsthand felt the pain of insufficient tools. And then he left that company to start LASSO to begin solving the problem for the industry. So welcome, Clay, and thanks for helping us unpack some of these things today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So obviously, there's been a lot of evolution that has happened in just the tech space as a whole, but not as much in the event industry. And so we talk about that a lot on the podcast on why that is, what are all the barriers to entry when it comes to creating modern software, better tools for our industry. But today we want to talk about why our industry has settled and kind of what that's looked like and why they can't afford to settle anymore. And so we sent out an industry survey to numerous people in the industry, different job titles, just to kind of get a feel for how they've operated over the last decade, what's important to them, what's held them back. And so, Clay, I'm going to throw some stats at you, and I would love to kind of get your take on how you interpret some of these stats.
All right.
So one of the things we learned was 28% of event companies have switched inventory tools multiple times in the last few years. And furthermore, we found out 25% of those switched because they said their current one was just too hard to use. Yeah. So how do you take that? What does that tell you about the state of inventory software right now?
It's pretty simple, is that our industry still hasn't found what it's looking for, right? And I think that's a huge issue. I think the problem is that number one, it's expensive to build software. Number two, I think a lot of the legacy companies in the industry that have been around for a long time just haven't really met the expectation of what they're really looking for. And they want something. I think our industry really wants something. They're desperately seeking something that looks good, that's very intuitive, that captures the day-to-day workflows, and they want it all in one place and they want it secure. And I just think that they keep switching, and then because they haven't found it.
So why do you think a good solution is so hard to come by for our industry, right? If there's not many people even attempting to build good software for our industry, why is that? What are some of those barriers to entry outside of just the sheer cost it takes to build good software? But why do you think there's very few people trying?
Yeah, well, I think you have to really understand the problem first, which is a huge component, and I think that's part of there are probably 10 plus companies that have, I would say the control points or the, inventory systems out there that are in our industry. But I wonder if you see people still struggling with that product market fit, and not really kind of fulfilling what the customer wants. It just tells you that you just haven't given them what they really need, right? And I think you have to understand it, understand the problem, understand the workflow, marry all those all those components together, to kind of come up with a good solution that the industry will accept. And it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting the nuances that exist within each company, right? It's one thing to build a piece of software to solve a problem, a specific workflow. But when you've got thousands and thousands of event companies, all who operate just a little bit differently, right? It's a moving target. And I think that's the art behind creating good software that can kind of meet the industry where it is. And the reality is the industry's in a lot of different places, right? Their workflow is just a little bit different. The workflow to produce a festival is going to be very different than the workflow to produce a concert, right? And so building technology that's flexible enough to understand those nuances is just hard, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of brain power, and it takes a lot of cooperation from the industry too.
Yeah.
So I think there's so many things that kind of contribute to that, and it's no small feat to try to figure those things out.
I also think, one other point I'll add there is that, if you think about our past 10 years in the industry, just as in general, or like what's been going on, the cloud wasn't something when a lot of the legacy systems started out, right? There weren't any cloud-based solutions. And so since now everybody is either working remotely, has a lot of third-time people, like third-party groups working on their projects. If you don't have a system kind of where you can do all of that in one place, you're not really in control of what you're managing. And I think what has happened is that the legacy systems have tried to come up to date with just switching over to the cloud, which is just it's a process in and of itself. And because of that, their competing interests, right, are the customers out there and the people in the industry. They want new features and they want new solutions. But when you're really, you can't offer those new things if you don't fix that problem first, right, of
Yeah.
moving to the cloud. And that's why you haven't seen any innovation or very little of it, which is, again, back to that product market fit. And, the industry, people just keep hopping from one software to another software with hopes that they're going to find it. And they just haven't.
Yep, absolutely. So, another staggering statistic as a result of our survey, 84% of event companies said they would adopt a new inventory system if it's integrated with their project management and workforce management software. So, I don't know about you, but that tells me people are ready for consolidation, all in one workflow. But just kind of curious, like, what does that tell you? 84% are open to adopting a completely new platform to run their business on, which again is no small. It's not like, hey, I'm going to turn on this mobile app. These companies are running their business on this. And 84% said they do it if it's integrated with the other workflows. So just kind of curious, what do you take from that?
I take away the exact same thing. I think it's incredibly important, and it's now the table stakes, right?
So the other thing we asked was, what's important to you? Either things that you currently have that you want to continue to have, or if you were to be able to reimagine and rethink what you would run your business on, what are the most important attributes that that platform would have to have? And I'm gonna kind of give you a few of those. The first one was 65% named it needs to be part of an all-in-one event production solution. The second one was 63% named a modern user-friendly interface, and we can't state that enough, right? Software has like evolved 100 times at the rate, that our industry has. And so people, they just expect it to be modern, user-friendly, intuitive. The third one was something that was built specifically for event companies. Again, going back to all those nuances, they want to be understood. They want to know that you've sat in their shoes, you understand all the complexities that they're dealing with. So being built specifically for event companies. And the last one kind of surprised me because I kind of feel like, well, duh, of course you're going to need that, but it's really important. But excellent support and service. And I think that means something different to different companies. Some people think support means a ticketing system, right? Other people think support means an actual human being to talk to who's responsive, who answers their phone, who helps you problem solve, and who's like in it with you. But let's kind of break down each one of these must have features. What do you think makes them so important? So let's start with being part of an all-in-one event production solution. What do you think makes that so important? Why is that?
Really what's happened in the past, right? You have these operating systems, and then you have these companies that are on these systems trying to compensate for all the things that they can't do. And so they're having to marry these other horizontal solutions, right, that aren't built specifically for their workflows. And then they have to try to cobble them all together, and they have a bunch of middlewares, and they have to pay people to actually do it. And then they've got to keep up with it. And then as software evolves, they either have to keep changing it or adding on to it. And so what used to be, one or two different softwares now is 12 to 15. And so then you've got your own team to kind of just keep up with all of that. And I think that's a huge problem. And so I think that, there is a better way. You can do it all in one place. People are dying to have that. It just hasn't really been offered. But I think that it's just really important to kind of cut all that out. Everyone wants to consolidate. It's faster. It's more efficient. You can save more money. You're going to make more money. You're going to have
Make
better
fewer
data.
mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much you can lose out just in communication, just by
Yeah,
itself. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, what about the second one? A second most important attribute people named a modern user friendly interface. Why do you think that's so important?
Well, I think if you live on a software, it needs to be easy, and it needs to look good. I mean, you're literally on it all day, every day, and I think if it just doesn't, I don't know, feel good, work the way you need it to, and it's not intuitive, it just keeps you from being as efficient as you probably should be, and probably just changes your outlook.
I also think, as our labor workforce changes, people are expecting to work for companies who have good tools. To walk into a company who's still on a spreadsheet, who's on an antiquated system, you're just not going to retain your team that way, right? And as you continue to bring new people into your organization, they're just going to expect more because that's the way the world lives, right? Is technology and innovation. So, no surprise there. And then the third one, built specifically for event companies. Why is that so important, especially in our industry?
Well, I think what we do is inherently complex, right? A lot of people don't work in the same offices. You do subcontract a lot of these events out to other people because they're specialists that might not live under your company's roof. And you need to understand and have the ability to collaborate where everyone is and what they're doing at what time and how much it's costing them. And I just think it's really, really important that companies have a good handle on the projects that other companies, their customers, are actually entrusting to them. It's really important.
And you also mentioned something earlier about a horizontal solution. For those of you that aren't maybe familiar with that term, a vertical solution is one that's built specifically for an industry, right? They're not trying to be anything to anyone else. Instead, they're trying to go deep within one industry versus a horizontal solution is, I don't know, a project management tool like Monday, as an example, right? And it's a fabulous tool, right? It's great for project management, but maybe not as great as project management built for this specific industry that has freelancers coming on and off. The importance of mobile applications when you're at the show site, restricting permissions for certain things, right? So Monday's a fabulous horizontal solution, industry agnostic, versus a vertical solution. And I don't think we have many vertical solutions in our space. I think there's a whole lot of horizontal, though. So, certainly important. And then the last one, talk to me about your vision for support and service. Like, what does that mean to you, especially as a previous founder of a mid-size event production company? Why does service matter so much?
Yeah, well, service matters because it's ultimately when you're living in these systems and they control what you do, it needs to work for you and it needs to work when you need it to work. And I think part of the problem is that if you have people who get stuck, or if you're bringing people on and off constantly, which is a huge, that's a reality of where the labor market is today. There's a lot of change, and you need people to get up to speed quickly, which gets back to your point of ease of use, which is a huge thing. And then you also need the service to kind of help people get to where they need to go. And then there is support. Is if something doesn't work, it's not okay to have to go to some third party or link on a website write a ticket and somebody overseas is going to go look at it and they're going to get back to you whenever they choose to. And that's just not okay because, if you're an event company, that event has to go on and you can't be slowed down or inhibited, right, by your software. That defeats the whole purpose of being on it in the first place. It's there to aid you. It's to make you more efficient. It's to make you better. And I think that's why you need people to help. I mean, it's not just software. It's the people that make it happen.
Yeah. And the other thing I would add to that is there's a difference between supporting your customer and being genuinely invested with your customer and having that genuine care and empathy, big word around here. Having the empathy for the customer, right? They're at a show site, run of the shows tomorrow, it starts tomorrow, and there's a problem. Well, it's Saturday morning. Well, it's not okay, right? Shows happen 24/7, 365 days a year. So I think service and support means different things to different people, but clearly something that our industry has named is a really, really important attribute.
Yeah, well, I think it also helps when your company. A lot of our folks, especially within Lasso, they are from the industry, so they understand the pain associated with not getting something when you need to, because you can't just push off a start time. Doesn't matter
Yeah,
if it's a concert, a festival, a general session of an important show. I mean, you can't just back those things up, so it has to go on time.
absolutely. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about logistics. Also, in this survey, we asked a lot about logistics. So, here are a couple stats for you. 88% of event companies surveyed ship gear out of their market every single month. A third of those are shipping gear more than 10 times a month, and yet zero of them have a way to track that gear in real time. And I don't know why that one surprised me. I kind of felt like if you're going to ship a fortune worth of your assets cross country, and there is a definitive deadline, the show is starting at X date and X time, and you see that truck pull away, and you're just kind of at the mercy of that provider to kind of tell you where it is it going to get there on time? So I don't know why that one really surprised me, that zero have a way to track that gear in real time. So it kind of just makes me wonder, like, how are they keeping track of that? um, so I don't know, I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that, Clay. Were you surprised by that?
I'm not surprised at all. I mean, we know that everyone is, they're all doing events everywhere, right? I mean, that's no surprise. It is a little bit surprising that things haven't changed at all. But I think that a lot of these, a lot of our customers and a lot of people in the industry are using third party providers, or they're using brokers, and they're not in direct control of even the people that are delivering their gear. And so I think that what everyone wants is, and if you've been in this situation before, I'll never forget it. I had a show one time in Salt Lake City, big snowstorm, impacting, one of our trucks, actually a couple of trucks that were supposed to get there. And, we had a load in time. We had a bunch of people standing around. We kept waiting. I kept calling our dispatch, asking, hey, where is this? Where is this? Where is this? And and oh, they're going to be there in 2 more hours, 2 more hours. And you said, well, you said that 6 hours ago, and it just doesn't come. And then until it's finally there, and it's just it's kind of nerve wracking, right? It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens often enough where it's a huge problem. Where I think in a perfect world, and we live in an age where you can track things now, and we should find that out. And the dialogue should be there too, not just to be able to track something, but to understand, and you should know well in advance if something's not going to be on time where it's needed.
Yeah, it's like the industry's been conditioned to just live without or make do, right? They've just done it that way for so long. That's just how it is. So we accept it.
Yeah.
Um, Really interesting though. All right. Next one. Only 17% of those that we surveyed were satisfied with the pricing of their trucks and transportation provider. So only 17%. So to me, that says obviously it's a very large cost of goods sold, especially if people
Mm.
are shipping gear more than 10 times a month cross country. That's super expensive, hard to compete, right? With the volatility of that pricing and how expensive it is. So let's talk about buying power a bit here. So right now, the industry doesn't have any. They're at the mercy of whatever trucking company they use at that moment in time, because it's not like they have dedicated partners relationships. It's kind of, they send it out to bid, whose ever, route is optimized for that, they kind of get it. But what would it mean for this industry to actually have buying power when it comes to their logistics?
Yeah, well, I think it'd be huge, right? And so if you think about, the stat that you had earlier, what is it they're doing? How many times a month are they sending semis out? Did it say?
88% of companies are shipping gear out every single month, and a third are shipping them 10 or more times a month. So it's
Yeah. So if you
often.
think about that, right? So 10 or more times a month. So one company doing that, right? So it's 120 times a year. Generally, what happens is they might have a preferred provider, but in many cases, they've got a couple just in case. And so there's a huge problem with that, right? So you're number one, the max that you're ever going to be valued to somebody is 128 or 120 a year, right? And that's not that might feel like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, to these huge trucking companies, it's just not a lot. And then when you're dividing that between two, three, four companies, it's also another issue. And so you're never going to get optimum power, that purchasing power, that way when you're splitting all that up. And on top of that, I think the other problem is that most of the companies that we found are also going to brokers. And so somebody else, like, they're making a huge markup on what they have to go find somebody else to do. And so that's also a big issue. And so I do think that there is ample opportunity to have, and this, I think that's one of the powers of Lasso, is to have all the customers on our platform. When you have that buying power with a large enough company that can provide the platform that you need, there's just a ton of value that can be generated there.
So, Clay, tell me, when we talk about innovation, you just mentioned, why that's important to Lasso. What is Lasso doing to address some of these opportunities for the industry?
Yeah. So what we went ahead and did is we worked hard to find a company that had, a couple things were really critical. Number one, we wanted to find a trucking company or logistics firm that had the scale, right, in the event that something goes wrong, that they can actually recover. And the partner that we chose, just to give you an example, they've got I would say an international platform specifically with logistics, North America, Canada, US, Mexico, ease, through the borders there. 28,000 of their own drivers, which is a huge thing. So they're not brokering any of that out. And then, the other thing is completely integrated in our platform. We wanted somebody that would do that with us, because one of the other pain points that we have not talked about yet is that it takes a while for these companies to get estimates and then turn that ultimately into an order. They want that automated, they want that streamlined, and they want that where they do their work, which is in the platform. And then beyond that, they want the purchasing power. And then once they've actually put the order in, then they want to be able to track it through the app from their warehouse all the way to to the location of the event that they've got.
Love it. So, in our survey, we also asked, what are the top 3 most important features that you're looking for in a logistics solution? And we gave them multiple options to choose from. And the top 3 that surfaced, no surprise, but would love to hear from you kind of why you think each of these are so important. The first one is real-time gear shipment tracking. So to be able to see at any moment in time exactly where that truck is, excellent customer service, and then instant all in quotes. So, what makes each of those so important?
Well, I think the instant all, we'll start with the back. The instant all in quotes, I think is, many times that you're trying to put a proposal together for your customer, and you've got to go to this other company to go get this, or multiple companies to go get this. And it could take a while, and especially it could take a while to get several of them to get something back where you can decide to go with one company, then ultimately put that into your quote to to your customer. So it takes time, and in many cases, it takes too long. And I think that that's something that should be remedied for sure. There's an easy solution. It just hadn't happened yet in our industry, and that's just kind of part of what we're bringing to. I think part of what we're trying to solve for. Second thing is, I think that when you've been on a show site and you haven't gotten what you need and you can't get a straight answer, that's really when you want to be able to track it for yourself, where you know exactly where that is at any moment in time. And then in the event that there's a problem, you want to be able to pick up the phone and actually talk to somebody who can give you a real straight answer. And I think that's also part of the strength of working with a company that doesn't broker anything to anybody else, is that because they have the information. And oftentimes, I mean, that example that I referenced before from Salt Lake City, that was through a broker, and they kept telling me what they thought was true, but then the reality was something different. And so we were just sitting there waiting, and it's really painful. It's terrible.
Yeah, you've certainly lived it. Well, let's switch gears for a minute. And I want to talk about data and security
Mm-hmm.
and why that's so important now more than ever. Because I think, you say security to some and they automatically think one thing. You say data to some and they think, well, that must mean reporting. But like in today's world, why is data and security so important, especially for those companies who may not be thinking about why it's important?
Yeah, well, I mean, it would probably surprise everybody to know that there isn't a SOC 2 certified company in our space, right? Which is
Well,
sort of
what is
shocking.
SOC 2 for those that don't know? What does that mean? What all's involved in that?
Yeah, so it is really just a compliance standard done by an outside third party. I think it was constructed by the American Institute of CPAs several years ago. But what it is, it's really it's a process that you go through on how these companies are managing customer data, and it could be anything from security, availability, data protection, process integrity, privacy, confidentiality, things like that. There are protocols that you've got to adhere to, not only just when you're writing code and deploying code, but how people are working within your industry. And you've got to get things like pen tests, like to make sure that, if you're getting attacked online, like how resilient is what you built. And I think it's just really important. And I think people take for granted their security because they are, they're opened up. And if you haven't put those protocols in place, and really what those SOC 2s do is that they go, they take a look at your system, go through it, make sure that there aren't any gaping holes. And when you do have a hole, that they close it down. And there's a ton of different points of entry where you could have a problem. And what they do is they just really help identify and tell you how to lock those things down. So, you can prevent a problem long before it occurs. But if you don't take that step and you don't, adhere to at least opening yourself up to, an outside third party who's going to come in and test everything, well, you're just asking for it. And at some point it will happen.
Yeah, especially with, all the new privacy laws that have passed. I mean, all these systems, this industry revolves around people, their information, right? Each state has, multiple privacy policies. There's GDPR. There's confidentiality, right? When it comes to your customers, what are you quoting, right? There's all sort. You're running your business on this, right? Your revenues are housed in there, your expenses. And so the privacy around that is just so important. And the people who are hacking into these things, they're smarter than ever before. And we have to be always one step ahead of them. So I would encourage all of you, no matter what software tool you use, ask your providers, are they SOC 2 certified? Super important to protect you and your people, quite honestly. All right. So as we wrap up, I have kind of one final question for you, Clay, especially now as we talked about in this episode. The industry is at a point, the world is at a point, quite honestly, not just our industry, where it's no longer an option to settle for things that don't allow your business to really be maximized and to do all that you intended it to do. What do you think the landscape looks like, especially now that we're at this tipping point in the industry? What do you think that looks like for those that are going to continue to try to make do and piece together 13 different pieces of software to accomplish 80% of what they need?
I would say life is too short, right? There's the hard way, which is the way that they've been doing it. And I would just encourage them to look for an easier way, right? Things have changed. And I do think that, they can kind of keep having these communication problems, keep having those 13 different systems, keep hiring people to, try to kind of weave all these things together and keep paying on top of that to, add more things on, and I think it's just, you should make it easier for your customers. You should make it easier for your employees. And there's just a better way. And I do think that it's really going to end up costing. You're going to pay now or pay later. And the longer you wait, the more you're going to pay and the harder it's going to be. And I think from a competitive standpoint, it's just going to put you behind.
Yeah, the further
And it
behind
doesn't
they're going
have
to
to be
be.
that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've had a lot of takeaways from this. I appreciate you joining us and kind of diving into a lot of these things. And my hope is, for those of you out there that are kind of thinking about it, if nothing more than hold your providers accountable, right? That's what makes them better, and they're either going to step up and deliver the things you need to make your business better, and if they don't, you are settling. And I think we're at a pivotal time in our industry where you just can't afford to do that anymore. The stakes are too high. Competition is great. Our industry is evolving so quickly. And so I'd encourage you to not settle, not make your team settle, not make your clients settle. And not to mention, at the end of the day, it adds to the value of your business every time you become more efficient and do some of those things. So never a bad thing to think about it that way as well. Well, thank you all for joining us today. If you like what you hear, be sure you hit subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments or feedback for us, we always love hearing it. Reach out to us at podcast@lasso.io. Thanks again, Clay, for joining. Really appreciate it.
Got it. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.